Hello everyone, this is Take and welcome to my studio. I have before us the brand new Fujifilm X-Pro3, but look at the color. I have the new Dura Black. Now previously in my other two videos I had the Dura Silver. Had the opportunity to be in Toronto and I brought back the Dura Silver and handed it back to Fujifilm Canada. So thank you so much Mark and Billy and the rest of the team for letting me have that before the release date. And we had a couple of events in Toronto and Montreal with beers and cameras. So thank you Juan for inviting me to tag along with you to help Fujifilm to launch the brand new X-Pro3 in those two cities. And on the way back, I asked Mark, hey, can I bring back the Dura Black? And he said, sure, but bring it back right away. So I'm shooting this video just the night before I am shipping it back. So thanks for the extended loan, but this is the Dura Black. And unfortunately, I can't have the Dura Black and the Dura Silver in Vancouver at the same time. What I do have is, if you guys remember my previous video, I did have GA645ZI. This is the medium format Fujifilm, and it was very close to that titanium finish. Now, this is not titanium, but it kind of has a champagne-y kind of a finish. This is not a matte finish either. But a better camera to maybe compare this to is what I did have in my previous video, which was the previous X-Pro2 in the Graphite. And in that video, I did mention that I do feel that this is probably the closest in terms of the tone, not the finish, because the Graphite does have more of a standard sheen to it, maybe like a kind of an eggshell, where the Dura Black has more of a matte finish with that Duratec coating, which is a magnet for fingerprints. I did try to clean this as best as I could before the video, and maybe you can kind of see my fingerprints and such on it. And you know, this finish is so hard. I always tell people, like, if you use your nail, it's actually taking your nail off. You see that? That's just my nail being filed off, because it's whatever that cold plasma carbon technology is, almost like a diamond coating on this. So it is scratch resistant. Moving this, you know, across a table with little bits of grit, the bottom won't scratch here, where the standard black on the X-Pro3 with titanium top and bottom, so it is still titanium on the black one, but it doesn't have that Duratec finish. And with that Duratec, you get the pluses of not having scratches, and more durable, but the negative of fingerprints. And you know, this standard Graphite, I would say, is probably the prettiest of all the various limited edition colors that Fujifilm has come up with over the years, even nicer than the Graphite Silver that they had for the T2. I think just the straight graphite. And they did have this with the 23 f2 that they matched on the X-Pro2. The sheen looks a little, not just sheen, but the depth of this looks a little different, even though they're supposed to be the exact same color. There's a slight difference, but I like this Graphite 23, and it looked really nice on the, maybe I'll just switch that right now. I put the 23 f2 on the Dura Black, and so what do you guys think about that? So this is the Dura Black, but with the 23 f2 and Graphite. So maybe, I think it'll be too expensive for Fujifilm to make a titanium lens, unless it's a very limited edition like the 50 f1, the knock they're gonna make, or 50.95. If that will be in titanium, like a limited run, and charge like an extra, I don't know, $300-$400 for that titanium, maybe. But I don't think there's a need to have a titanium lens unless you got the extra bling bling to spend on your lenses. But these are the two here, the X-Pro2 and Graphite, X-Pro3 in Dura Black. Both very pretty cameras. And one of the things I didn't mention on the previous video, and I apologize for it, is that it's because I used either 23 or 35 on the X-Pro3 when I was testing it, and most of my focal lengths are kind of in that field of view. But the older X-Pro1 and the X-Pro2 did have the magnifying viewfinders, depending on what lens you had there. So on the X-Pro2, you do get the 18mm frame lines. On the new X-Pro3, you do not. It starts at 23, and that makes sense to me because I think most people are shooting with either a 23 or 35 on the X-Pro3. If you're an 18mm shooter, you can obviously still put it on here, but you won't get the frame lines. It goes beyond the frame lines, like outside of the frame lines that you can get. Similar to this one, you could put a 16 on here. You get the 18 frame lines, but you can use the furthest edge to get 16, and so that's the negative. If you're an 18 shooter, you're gonna have to, if you want to see frame lines, you're gonna have to shoot this with the EVF. Just like anything wider than 23, you're gonna be using the EVF. And one of the reasons is because, of course, they have that high, the high resolution, high refresh frame rate OLED EVF that just takes up more space than the previous. A much more complicated design, as well as the actual eyepiece. I'm not sure if you can see this or not. I'm gonna try to bring it up as close as I can. The eyepiece is much bigger on the new X-Pro3. So they've enlarged the eyepiece. Those of you who wear glasses that had issues with the X-Pro2 and the X-Pro1, you're not gonna have that same issue with the X-Pro3. And so those are sort of like the trade-offs that Fujifilm had made to make this EVF bigger, I mean the actual eyepiece, eye cup bigger, as well as to incorporate a much higher resolution, higher refresh rate, OLED, much higher contrast ratio, EVF mode. To do all that, it just took up more space, which now they had to simplify the viewfinder to have it non-magnifying. So I like the 18mm field of view on the APS-C, but with this camera, I actually do prefer shooting with the 23. And another point I thought I would mention is that when I was in Toronto, I was talking to Francis and Billy and Mark, and especially with Francis and Billy, they actually prefer the older 23-1.4 or the 35-1.4 with the X-Pro3 using classic negative. And I tested it myself. I tested with the 23-1.4. I didn't have a chance to test it with the 35-1.4, but Billy's been getting some really nice results, and same with Francis, using the older 1.4 lenses on the X-Pro3 using classic negative to get that old school vintage look. So I'm gonna try to get my hands on a 23-1.4 and a 35-1.4. I've been a huge fan of the Fujicrons that I pegged probably back in 2017 when the 23F2 came out, and I started calling them Fujicrons, of course, like Summicron with the Leica lenses, meaning F2 constant. But now maybe going to the Fuji Luxes, going to the 35-1.4 and the 23-1.4 with the X-Pro3 using classic negative. And I think that will be something that I'd be interested in seeing what kind of a rendering I will be getting with that combination. And I've had a chance to be shooting with the X-Pro3 now for over a month or almost a month now, and so I've had a lot of time shooting with it. This isn't gonna be just like let's talk about this camera in terms of just the finish, but my shooting style, I've noticed I am shooting a lot more waist level, and also you can check your photos more discreetly with this type of LCD. And for those of you that say, well, the X-Pro3, I mean the XT3 and the XH1 can do that, it can't. So I have an XH1 here. You can do this, but if you notice the EVF hump gets in the way. Look how much it intrudes, almost halfway. And so it's not as easy to look straight down like this. As well, the X-Pro2 and the X-Pro1 never had an articulating screen. So it just allows you to shoot this camera differently if you are an X-Pro shooter. So having the option to shoot like this, or just completely ignoring the LCD screen and having this covered. Shooting at night, I noticed even if you shoot with OVF and then you have this covered, you have no light shining back at you, and it really felt like shooting with an old film camera. As I showed you before, the GA645ZI, this is a medium format point and shoot that basically Fujifilm made in a rangefinder style. Same thing, there's nothing lighting back at you when you're shooting at night. And this camera here really was conducive to night shooting. When I was in Montreal and Toronto, I spent most of my time shooting at night, and I will maybe I'll embed some pictures now. can see I had a lot of fun shooting with this camera at night. And while I was in Toronto, I did bring the X-T3 with me to do vlogging. Because I wasn't sure if Fujifilm would loan me X-Pro3 in a different finish to bring back with me. So I brought the X-T3 just in case. I did vlog with the X-Pro3, and I like it because one of the things with vlogging is I often put my hand behind like this and I cup the camera like this. And with the X-T3 or the XH1, if you have the touch, the silent mode, which I actually do like shooting video that way, if you touch the screen, you might accidentally fiddle with some of the functions. So sometimes what you do is, I used to just kind of pull the screen up and hide my hand in behind. But when you have the X-Pro3, there's nothing in the back to accidentally press. So vlogging with it, with this X-Pro3 was actually kind of fun. I enjoyed doing that. So the whole time I was in Toronto, I rarely shot with the X-T3 unless I really had to. I enjoyed shooting with this camera, and I am loath to return this, and I thought for sure I was going to be happy with the X-T3, but now I don't know, guys. The X-Pro3 with this cool articulating screen, if you shoot with your LCD a lot, probably the X-T3 is a better choice. But I even noticed, like, shooting overhead, if you shoot upside down and this way, guys, does that make sense? Holding this upside down and over your head this way and looking straight up, you could shoot overhead with this, no problem. Even shooting overhead this way, having this kind of down like this, without having to articulate this backwards, you still can kind of go above your head, having this down like this, and then waist level shooting this way, and then always being able to cover it. Adjusting features, like, you know, changing modes and stuff, it was a bit of a hassle to always have to open it and adjust, but that just made me adjust less, and as well chimp less while shooting with the EVF and or OVF. And I often kind of back and forth just for fun, but as I mentioned, shooting at night with the OVF I find is very advantageous because not only you not get screen blank out, when it gets dark at night, the EVF is not as effective. During the day it's great, but at night it slows down. You get a little bit of ghosting or whatever that's called. The refresh rate is not as fast. So at night, OVF is great on this camera. And then having that back screen, it's just it's a great night shooting camera, and it's just a beautiful looking camera as well. And you know, having a camera that makes you want to shoot with it versus you having to have to shoot with it. If you shoot with the Sony or Canon, and you're one of those guys that have maybe an X100F for fun, and yet you use a DSLR or another mirrorless system for work, I think this is also another camera that would be conducive to enjoying photography, because just kind of makes you shoot in a different way from other cameras. And so I'll be returning this. Thank you, Fujifilm Canada, again for loaning this to me. Again, I just wanted to show you how the finish looks like. So Graphite versus Dura Black. Very similar in tone, but the finish is different. This is matte, and this is more the standard, like an eggshelly semi-gloss kind of finish. This will show fingerprints, but will not scratch. This will not show fingerprints very easily, but will scratch. Although this is kind of an anodized finish, it doesn't scratch that easily. And of course, with the Graphite X-Pro2, you get the matching, well, here we go. You get the matching 23 f2, which is a really pretty lens. And so my wish list is, you know, maybe a titanium lens, but it probably will be cost prohibitive, as well as remaking the 23 f2 and the 35, not 23 f2, the 23-1.4 or the 35-1.4, and remaking those. And my dream would be that those are actually mechanical lenses, not autofocus, but just actual coupled lenses, mechanically focusing. You're actually moving lens elements instead of it being electronically controlled. Yeah, that's great. And also, maybe one more thing I'm mentioning, did I miss the D-pad? I didn't miss the D-pad. Some people who are really D-pad centric, maybe Fujifilm, again, is trying to make you shoot in a different way with this camera. I don't see them removing the D-pad on the X-T3 or the XH series. So the XH, so here's the XH1, and it has the D-pad as well as the joystick, and that will probably still remain. This is just kind of a pro robust camera. Huge buttons for your AFL, AEL buttons here. This thing here, I noticed the previous drive mode was sort of up on the D-pad. This one here, the drive mode is way over this way here. And so if you don't have big hands, I think it's a little bit of a pain to have to reach way over here. right? Just to do dry, because if you're going, like I shoot with video a lot, so going from video to stills, always having to reach over, and then this AEL, AFL button here, you can reprogram it here if you wanted to, but even this is an odd spot. I wish the button was more here. I think that would be more of a natural place, or be able to custom function button this this rear dial here, which acts as it pushes in. The front dial here no longer pushes in on the X-Pro3, which it did on the X-Pro2, so you lose that custom function. So you do have less custom functions on the X-Pro3. For many that would seem kind of backwards, but in one sense it is backwards. The Fujifilm just wants you to shoot slower and differently on the X-Pro3, and if you want all those features, you either go with the XH series, which the XH2 should be coming in the next 6 months or so, or you shoot with the XT3. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I have another video where I actually talk about my trip to Toronto and Montreal with Fujifilm Canada, as well as Juan from Beers and Cameras, but that's a different video. This one here, I just wanted to showcase the X-Pro3 in the Dura Black versus the Graphite. So thanks for watching and happy shooting.